Word. And we'll send that recording to our gluten-free sourdough group. Oh, interesting. It won't go live. So I'll just do the recording and I'll put it live myself so that I don't have to worry about troubleshooting that on the fly. But hey, everybody, I am excited to do this last chat with you guys today. It won't be the last one ever, of course. It'll be, we'll be repeating this through maybe December. Definitely we'll repeat this in January. That'll be a question that I'll ask at the end. So hopefully we'll get a few more folks on live with us. But I just wanted to recover and recap a few things. And so this is in conjunction, as I've talked about all along, with our 10-day reset that we do in our Juice Plus community. And I absolutely love this reset, especially before a holiday like this. So for it to start and then end on the Wednesday right before Thanksgiving, I'm feeling good. I'm feeling clean. I've flushed everything out. And not that I'm going to indulge a ton over Thanksgiving, because that's just not who I am. But it does give me a little bit, I feel like, of a clean reset for whatever I decide to cheat on, if I decide to cheat on anything. So our 10 days are, we cut out gluten as one of the things that we cut out in that 10-day reset. And so this gluten-free sourdough recipe workshop started a long time ago. This recipe was something I developed in 2018, but it's definitely been fun adding it into our shred community and talking about our 10-day reset. So why gluten-free? I wanted to kind of circle back and touch on that, because, you know, a lot of people don't eat gluten because they don't think it's good for them, or they don't have a reaction to gluten. They just have stopped. And then vice versa. A lot of people are trying to stop because they know they have a reaction to gluten, but it's hard to stop because gluten is so, not gluten, but breads. Breads are so tasty. The other thing is, we don't know where all of the places that gluten hides in. It hides in soy sauce. It hides in caramel color. It hides in all these different places. Oats, for instance, can be glutinous, even though by nature they are not, right? So, so why do we cut it out? It's definitely inflammatory. It's something that will trigger a gut. If you have an unhealthy gut microbiome, or you've lost some of the cilia inside of your intestinal tracts, it's something that, you know, it's a food that can trigger a negative response in any of those areas. So it can cause inflammation. It can cause gut issues, IBS, you know, inflammation in the gut, sour tummy, GERD, you know, a lot of things connected to gut health and microbiome health. And so when we focus on sourdough, we're focusing on repairing some of that gut, as well as cutting out this gluten piece with us using this gluten-free sourdough. And so if you're somebody that eats gluten-free already, go ahead and, if you're watching the recording or you're watching it live, put in the chat, gluten-free. I'm gluten-free, or just gluten-free is fine. And I need to pull up the chat so I can watch what's going on there. So put in the chat gluten-free, or in the comments below if you're already gluten-free. And if you, I want to say too, if you have started your starter and you even baked bread, go ahead and put that in the comments too. I'd love to see how many people have started and baked as well. And I was going to go ahead and comment in there really quick that we are not live. Live isn't working. Come to the Zoom. All right. Thanks for letting me do that real quick, just to make sure people know that we are here. And thank you for typing that in, Sally. Almost totally gluten-free for 10 years. That's amazing. And that you've baked your bread. So I can't wait to hear about that. My starter is ready, Michelle says. So yay, you just got some of the ingredients. Good job. I just realized I've signed myself up to make gluten-free drop biscuits for Thanksgiving, which we're going into the mountains for, to be with my husband's family. And I only have like this much arrowroot left. And I was like, oh crap, Craig, like I've totally signed up for that. But hopefully, I think that is one of the 2 things that are in our store here locally, thankfully. So hopefully I'm not setting myself up to have everybody be really excited about my gluten-free sourdough and I'm only bringing 1 loaf. I actually think I'll get 2 loaves out of this, but all right. So just to review kind of to what we started with our starter, and I got mine out of the fridge because I put it in the fridge and then was like, oh, I think we should just bring some of this to Thanksgiving. So I'm really excited to do that and to share this a little bit further down the line. So we started with our starter, which is just rice flour. Mine is still bubbling, but I took it out of the fridge, stirred it up, and added another half a cup of rice flour. And it's 1-to-1 rice flour and water. So whether that's a quarter of a cup or half a cup, you know, I saw a lot of people posting. I think it was Darla that shared with me that she had migrated to a pint jar because she had made her put a half a cup in every single time for 4 or 5 days or twice a day. And so she was like, mine's overflowing. So you don't need a ton of this. So I wanted to revisit and say that you don't need a ton of this starter. You know, you only need a half a cup of starter to start with, and for the recipe, right? So really when you're making your starter, you're going to keep adding to it. But ultimately for one recipe, you only need enough to get to a half a cup. So you could just add in a tablespoon of each every day or twice a day. And a couple of the tips that came up through questions, and good questions, everybody, was the quantity, the type of rice. So brown rice is fine, white rice is fine, but you want to start the starter with your rice flour only. And I tried a new brand. I tried this Puro Raw organic rice flour, and mine is a brown rice flour. And then the other question that came up too was, can you use another ingredient? Can you use 1-for-1 flour? And really, I say stick with this recipe until you're comfortable with it, and then start tweaking it so you know what good tastes like, because everybody's getting good results from this, and I hope that's the case across the board. And you want to start with something simple, a simple ingredient like rice flour. You don't want to mix the whole 1-for-1 in there, and be worried about all of those multiple ingredients marrying with each other and trying to rise them through a starter. So that's what we started with. We started with our rice flour starter. And so if you're joining us late, I'm just kind of reviewing a little bit. Hi, Ro, thanks for coming. I'm going to mute you so we have a clean recording, but and welcome, Michael, as well. I saw you join us too. So started with the starter. We fed it for 4 days, right? Because Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, and maybe you fed it Friday even as well. Nice. So Sally, I like seeing that you use the white rice flour instead of brown. I use both. I've switched between both. They taste a little bit different. And Michelle's got a question in the chat. Does it have more flavor? And I think the brown does have more flavor, but nominally. I don't think you would notice. You might notice if you put them back to back, but I don't think you would notice, if you were just coming back from not eating it for a while and you try this recipe, and I think that they would taste the same for you. So we started with that. We fed it, a quarter of a cup once or twice a day of water and rice flour, and stirred it. And we stirred it a bunch of times a day. So that was another question I had. One person wasn't stirring it, so it was separating. And I was like, yes, definitely you want to stir it. Good questions. I love all the questions. And you do want it to get kind of bubbly and stinky by the end of the couple of days. Not stinky like off, but sour, right? You want it to smell like sourdough. And it does when it comes out of the oven. It still smells like that too. I love that smell. So then on Friday, we added the rest of our ingredients, and it's a half a cup of everything, which makes it super easy. I think it's almost like my brain needed that or something. So we have the sorghum flour. We have oat flour. We have arrowroot starch / flour. And then we have the rice flour. So you're going to do a half a cup of all of that each, not all of it, each, half a cup of each. So I'm just going over the recipe again. It is posted. It's in the files section under the workbook. I think I also posted it as just an image so that you could have that recipe just by itself, but it's super easy. It's a half a cup of all of those things each, and a half a cup of your starter each, and then a cup and a half of a liquid. And I did when we made it on Friday, I did water, but sometimes I'll do oat milk or soy milk, a different kind of nut milk. I don't love almond milk. For me, when it's cooked, it has a weird sour flavor in itself. And I don't like those two combined, the sourdough and the sour kind of almondy. I don't know if anybody else notices that, but that's something like when I go and get a latte and I have to have almond milk because they don't have oat or soy or coconut. I'm always like, no thanks. So that's just me. So what did I just say? A half a cup of everything, and then a cup and a half of water, and 2 teaspoons of xanthan gum, and 2 minus maybe 1.5 teaspoons of salt. I think the recipe does have 1.5 teaspoons of salt. And Sally's nodding. Thanks, Sally. So, and I always go a little bit less even. And this one, I think I did go a lot less, and it was not as good. I put what I had for lunch today was I split it open, cut it in half and toasted both, and then put avocado on it and a little bit of salt and a little bit of fake butter. So Michelle, I see your question. Will 48 hours help it rise more and I assume that you're talking about when you're combining all of these ingredients. It's because there isn't yeast there. It really isn't going to rise a ton. It just kind of stiffens up. Like I feel like it just sort of solidifies or grows ever so slightly. It might. I was just trying to sort out the details with my husband because we're leaving Wednesday and I won't need my breads until Thursday, and I want to bake them. So I think I'm going to make it Tuesday. And like you just asked, let it rise over 24 or 48 hours, and see how that goes. So I would try that. Once, like I said, you have all of this stuff down, you can start altering things. So, I did want to actually, let's see, let me look at my notes really quick before I get ahead of myself. So in the chat, if you baked, Sally, I think you just said you baked bread. So did you bake a loaf of bread? I would love for you to put in the chat, like what you baked. Yeah. Okay. I see it. Nice. It's like a little, you did the drop biscuits. And I don't know if I've changed it so that you can unmute yourself, but I'll ask to unmute you and then you can, there we go.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So my feedback is that I was pleasantly surprised because I thought maybe the starter was dead because it didn't bubble.
Yeah.
And then when I mixed it all together, it just sort of sat there and looked the same for 24 hours. But then it tastes delicious. And I sliced one of the rolls up. And so, I like the profile as well.
Yeah, it's bubbly.
And it's almost too yummy because I ate too much of it.
It is too yummy. I agree. I will eat too much of it. And that's actually why I stopped baking it. Right. But that's okay. It's holidays. So you can maybe eat a little more, but or just walk a little bit more, right? Yeah, go around the block one more time. And so Ro, I see you've got your mother in the fridge. You haven't added to it yet. But I love that you started. No, it's not dead by all means. Now, did you use the rice flour? Or do you use regular?
I added to it.
Yeah, that's fine. Like I said, I just took mine out of the fridge. I mean, it only had been in there for a couple of days. It should feasibly last in the fridge for a long time if you continue to feed it every couple of weeks. So great question. I would, if you're going to store it in the fridge, I mean, luckily, if it does go bad, you can start it over pretty quickly. It's not like, when you've ruined somebody's real sourdough mother from their, grandmother in Italy, and you're like, oh my gosh, now what, right? None of that pressure, which is so great. So, but yeah, someone, and I think it was Valerie, told me that hers actually got a little moldy, but she's in Florida. So she was like, did it get a little hot? Was it the flour that was old? I mean, I don't know. I've never seen that. I have never seen just yours got a little moldy, Sally? It did. Okay. And I was out on the, do you keep your house warm? No. Maybe I do have to ask you to unmute. My mouse isn't, there you go. You can do it. Okay, great.
No, it's pretty cool in my kitchen.
Okay.
Yeah, I was surprised. I hadn't sterilized the jar, but I don't think I should need to.
Yeah, not if it ran through the dishwasher.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well,
Okay.
I ignored it. I scraped it off and pretended
Maybe
I
that was
hadn't
you
seen
that
it.
said, maybe it was you that said that you did that then, because I can't imagine that both of you, you didn't tell me that?
I
No.
didn't say anything.
Okay. All right. Well, I think it's important to know. I think that's like, there isn't a kitchen mold that can kill you. So I will say that. But nobody likes to eat the taste of mold, right? So I always say too, like, are you going to scrape it off and is it going to taste okay? And that's the thing. Maybe you start over. But that's new to me. I have never seen it do that. So I don't know why it would do that. And I can only imagine that it is probably from the flour. Right. It was probably spores are probably already in the flour, because where else would they come from if you had a lid on it? And right. So it's always a science experiment. I always say baking is legit science. And this was something that I said on the second Zoom is, now I'm starting to do this, as a host, I'm really hearing some very interesting feedback. And from the people who say, oh, I'm terrible at baking, I'm starting to realize it's maybe that you're not terrible at baking. You're just terrible at following instructions, which I admittedly am also terrible at following. I don't love to read the instruction book when we're putting together something. And my husband always has to like slow me down and say, we need to read this, because I'm ready to just put it together. Even if it's a little lopsided, it's fine. But yeah, that doesn't work with baking, unfortunately, because it really is science and things are kind of precise. So when I say I spent 6 months tweaking this recipe, it was because I was trying to find the combination that made this result. So, I would make it and be kind of unhappy with it. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't what I was looking for as someone that had to eat gluten-free, that wanted to match gluten-free to what gluten sourdough bread looks like. Right. So, so that leads me to alterations, because there are someone asked me, can I use guar gum? Well, you could use guar gum. I think she was asking instead of sorghum flour. And sorghum flour, if you look at it, it looks a lot like the rice flour. So you don't want to sub something that looks like, that is basically a gum, like a tacky, gluey substance for flour. So you got to make sure you're in the same wheelhouse. So guar gum, which I don't recommend in general. Xanthan gum is a much healthier gum. It's got a much better source. I'm not a big fan of guar gum. It's one of those things that if it's on an ingredient list, I typically won't buy it. So my 2 cents on guar gum versus xanthan gum, but you could sub one for the other. You could sub for this arrowroot starch, because this is like a starch, it squeaks like cornstarch does, like baking powder even kind of does. So that's its own wheelhouse, right? So there's a potato starch flour. There's tapioca starch / flour. Arrowroot, I just thought performed better. I tried those other two. I bake a lot. Well, I haven't in a couple of years, but especially during COVID, when everyone else was baking, I was baking too. And I forgot, Hannah reminded me today, that's where the sourdough craze kind of started, I think, because we were all locked up. But I was baking before COVID, and I tried, see, this recipe on the back here even has tapioca flour in addition to this arrowroot starch. And quite a few other things. Like there are a lot of ingredients, such as this one, cream of tartar, that are on a lot of gluten-free recipes that I am the kind of person I don't want to deal with. I don't want to deal with trying to find 6 different 1 teaspoon ingredients for a recipe like snickerdoodles, which is what's on the back of this arrowroot bag. obviously, like, you know, the sweeteners and the flours and everything I will use, but if it's got something like that, and I think a couple of the original recipes from the blog post that I have, I wrote right after I designed this recipe. So if you haven't seen that, go into the workbook. It's in that workbook, and it's got a lot of great resources. That blog post was just, I kind of brain dumped into that blog post of everything that I did to get this recipe. So it's a lot. For those of you who aren't knowledge-based learners and you just want to watch something, don't go down that rabbit hole. But for those of you who like more information and links and recipes, I tried several that had the cream of tartar in it, and I was just, I don't want to deal with all of that. I want something that I can just half a cup, dump, and go and be done. So, and then, so oat flour and the sorghum flour and the rice flour, you know, they're all that kind of thick starch flour. I wouldn't sub anything for those, especially the oat flour. I think the oat flour personally is what makes this recipe. If there were anything that you were to forget, I would not forget the oat flour. You could probably double up on a few of the other flours to make it the same, you know, like the sorghum flour, you could probably cut and use just oat and rice. But still, that's kind of what makes the recipe, is all of these different flours. So corn, you could sub. I would maybe put it in the sorghum, because I just said don't take out the oat, but I think I might have in the last video talked about that, and I want to maybe recant that because I think the oat is super important. It's also important for all the nutrients that are in oat flour and oats. I'm Irish, so I'm biased, but I think oats are a really important part of my diet. But it'll make it taste like corn flour, you know, so corn meal, cornbread. That's what I'm trying to say. So you could use this as like a sourdough cornbread and sub your cornmeal or corn flour for the sorghum flour. I already said the tapioca. So they will affect the taste. You know, you start subbing things, it'll affect the taste, it'll affect the consistency. But I would try. And then I love the additions. I started to talk about this last time. I wrote a few more down. I love what I'm seeing people using. So they're using, I saw somebody use black sesame seeds. Lori used the everything but the bagel, everything spice, you know, like the everything bagel has all of the different spices in that. She sprinkled that on top. That looked great. I love adding cinnamon to make it a little bit sweeter. I won't ever take out all of the salt, but I'll take out maybe half of the salt and add in a little bit of sugar, just a little bit, like a teaspoon or two, to make it a little bit sweeter if it's going to go with something that's on the sweeter side, like a curry. I love throwing things in there like that make it a little bit more flavorful too. Like I have put chocolate chips in there. It's weird, but I like it. Because then when you make a drop biscuit and you cut it open, it's not super sweet. Like I always think muffins, gluten-free muffins especially, are so over-sweetened. And so this doesn't really have anything sweet. You throw a few chocolate chips in it and it's a sweet treat, you know? So what you got there? Hot cereal, 8-grain hot cereal, oats, gluten-free. Nice, Sally. Yeah, nice. Yeah, well, and if you're gluten-free for 10 years, you're starting to find, you know, all of these things are like the 1-for-1 flour. 10 years ago, there was no such thing as 1-for-1 flour, right? You're shaking your head. Like, I feel so blessed to be like in an era where this is easier to do. Because when I first started in 2007, so 15 years ago, 16 years ago, it was harder to bake gluten-free. It was harder to find ingredients, and it's getting so much easier. Gluten-free pizza, almost every restaurant, if I ask, has gluten-free pizza. So I love that. A couple of the alterations too that I noticed. Lori said she had to cook it for longer, which makes sense. She's at altitude, so 40 minutes maybe instead of 30 if you're at altitude. And I loved all the different styles. So Hannah made, you know, a nice big round bun and scored the top of it and posted that picture. I didn't see anybody make challah, so I would throw that out there that it's, you know, obviously it's not challah, but, you know, you can shape it like that. Or a braid, just in general, you know, a braided bread. I'm lazy, so I just do the drop biscuits and the drop loaf, and it comes out, looking kind of like a chunky mess, but I don't mind that. But I really loved seeing people form theirs, so that was pretty cool. The last thing I was going to talk about, and it looks like this is good timing because we're kind of nearing the end here, but I will open it up for questions. So what I do to make my life a little simpler, especially as we're still building our kitchen here, is I combine them all at once. And just the dry ingredients. So just the half a cups of the 4 flours and the xanthan gum and the salt. So this has all of that in there. Actually, I left it open because it doesn't have the salt in it. So I need to go, and I don't know if you guys have ever seen these. They work to keep a bag, like dry your bags, but then they also have these little clips. Well, I can use this one. So they have clips and they extend. I'm not going to extend that one without making a mess. So you can have a long bag, and they move. I don't know even what you would call these. I mean, I'm sure they came from China, but I got a box of them. They were like 10. I don't need 10. So I gave them away at one Christmas because I was like, I really only need 2 or 3 of these, but they're great for this. If you're by yourself and you're trying to put flour, especially into a bag this small, from a measuring cup that's, you can see, mine's covered in flour now, a measuring cup that's big and bulky and awkward, anyway, great little tip there. So I like to make several of them. I'll write on the bag, the date that I did it, just so that I'm clued in on how fresh that flour is. I probably wouldn't let it go 6 months because I would be worried now that it might mold. But in any event, that's news to me. I mean, we all learn together, right? So yeah, and I'll make 3 or 4 of these. So then the next time that I've got my starter going, I don't have to get all the flours out. I just get this one bag out, dump my starter in, dump this in there, add some water. Bob's your uncle. I've got some sourdough, right? So so I wanted to share that little tip. And like I said, I'll make 3 or 4 of those, and then I can just grab one, especially if I'm in the mood. I wouldn't necessarily, there are times of year where I wouldn't stock up like that, in the summer or whatever, but coming into winter, I usually will do that. So I wanted to just share my little bulk tip. And then, yeah, and then the last question that I have for you guys, and I will, like I said, open it up to questions too. But do we do this again during our next 10-day reset in December, or do we, and we usually actually do 12 days of smoothies. We skip our December reset anyway, but I would still be open to doing it again if anybody wanted to invite some peeps, or we do it in January, which I think is a better idea, because I think getting people together in December is hard. But I'll put that out there. So whether you're watching it live, comment in the chat, or watching it the replay and you would have a preference, put the preference in there, December or January, both, and I'll make a decision after Thanksgiving. And then in closing, I just wanted to say, I'm just grateful that everybody is baking this gluten-free sourdough recipe. I resisted sharing this recipe, not because I covet it, just because I have very little bandwidth right now. But our kitchen just came together, so I feel like my brain just opened up a little bit. We still have to plumb everything, which is, I don't even want to go there. Actually, the bathroom is pretty much plumbed, but we still have to plumb all the sinks and do the gray water, and that's like a whole big project. So making this, and if you don't know what we're doing, we bought a farm and we're building yurts, and it's just been one hell of an adventure. But we have heat, so we're good. Like that was the big thing. So anyway, not a lot on my plate, and everybody rallied to come together for this, and our group has just, it's grown so quickly in the last week that I'm super grateful that we're all here and baking together, gluten-free, and the gluten-free vibe is spreading through the holidays, because I hope that everybody tries that through the holidays and sees if they feel better for doing that, making that one switch even through the holidays. It's not easy, I know, been there, but it's better for you. Trust me. I won't go into all of that, but anyway, any questions? I'll open it back up to questions. And then
Thank you so much, Andy. Thank you
Yeah.
so very much.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Ro. I appreciate that. Yeah.
I appreciate you.
Yeah. Cool. Well,
I
I hope
watched all the videos and I told Dr. Candace Corson I was jumping on today and coming with you live. So
Yeah.
appreciate everything you're doing.
Oh, thank you, Ro. I appreciate that. I love Dr. C so much. She's just the best. She locked arms with me early on in my journey once she heard my story about Hashimoto's, and I have done a couple calls with her, and yeah, I love that because yeah, she's just the sweetest. I love her. I love her wild hair. Every picture.
I
Yeah.
love her too.
Yeah. So I'm glad you're here, and I'm
Thank
glad
you.
to share this. And I have, like I said, I have no rights to this recipe. I mean, I developed it from someone else's recipe, right? So it's like we're all sharing. So I just hope that it gets out there, and I would love to hear if you make changes to it, what you do, and how that, how that shifts the recipe. Sally, go for it.
Just a question with the regular gluten bread that I love to bake and give away. Part of the fun is kneading it and shaping it. So could we add more flour so that we could knead this? And then could we, roll it into kind of smooth shapes?
Yeah, I don't know if you saw Hannah's, but her loaves were
It was beautiful. So is that what she did? Do you think she kneaded
She
it?
did post another picture, and you can reach out to her, right? You can just message her since you see you're in the group together, and now you're connected.
Oh,
So you could just message her, click on her face, her little circle, and send her a message and ask her if she needed it. For me, what it takes me to is like walking wool and like chanting. And I love it when women get around a table and like knead together or make gnocchi together. Like I come from an Italian, I said I'm Irish, but one side's Irish and the other side's Italian. And that Italian side is always like making pasta together. And so I love that. I love it when we come together to do something like that. So and no, you don't need to knead this bread. Right. And it might make it a little more gummy. It might, I feel like in the beginning, I might have done that. What's that?
It might make, it's worth experimenting. So
Yeah.
also I was thinking as a pizza base, probably add more liquid so that it's
to make
more
it less
likely to pool.
So what I would do, that's a great question, because I was going to say for a couple of things, what to make it more or less. So if you want it more fluffy, right? What makes it fluffy is the sourdough, is the starter. So you could add a little more of the starter liquid, and you could reduce the flours and reduce them all to maybe 1/3 of a cup, and increase your sourdough. I mean your starter to like 2/3 of a cup from a 1/2 a cup. Does that make sense?
Sure.
Okay.
I gotta go, but thank you again.
Yeah, I'm going to close
Thanksgiving
this.
to everyone.
Thank you, Ro. I appreciate
Bye-bye.
you. And yeah, thank you for being here. And whoever joined us late on the iPhone, thank you for coming. I can't quite see if I didn't recognize you because this picture is little, but if you go to the group, the recording will be up shortly. I was not able to cast it live. So I threw up my number in there in case someone could come on last minute, but we will get it live to the page ASAP. So thank you, Sally.
Thank you.
It was so good to see you. Please send
Good
my
to
love
see
to
you.
Greg, and actually I'll reach out to him too. So all right, guys.
Okay.
Thank you. Post any
Bye.
questions you have. Let's keep the group alive and keep sharing pics and stuff too. Bye, guys.
Bye. Thanks.